Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, we welcome you all for the webinar on competition law and underdog with wide arms. This session is organized under the aegis of Banking, Finance and Corporate Affairs Expert Committee, BCIC. On behalf of BCIC, we express our sincere thanks to Mr. Ashok Kumar Gupta, Chairman, Competition Commission of India, for accepting our invitation to deliver the keynote address. Thank you very much, sir. The Chamber also acknowledges the support of Mr. Senthil Nathan, Director, Natraj Oil Mills, and Mr. Sri Kumar Narayan, Founder CEO, Winfoware Technologies, for accepting our invitation to address at the session. The Chamber acknowledges the support of the Chairman, Dr. K.V. Om Prakash, and Mentor, Mr. N. Venkat Krishnan, of the committee for structuring this session. We also welcome Mr. Prashant Shivdas, partner Shivdas and Shivdas, for conceptualizing this session, and also the Chamber acknowledges his support in organizing this webinar. Over to you, Dr. Om Prakash, sir. Thank you.
I welcome all of you, those who have participated in this webinar, a webinar sponsored by Shivdas and Associates, and this is a 4-part webinar, and it is being conducted every week to cover the entire gambit of the Competition Act. So, first of all, I welcome Chairperson Ashok Kumar Gupta for having accepted to join us and see that this webinar series is conducted with appropriate topics with the help of the sponsor Shivdas Associates. I also welcome our mentor, Mr. Venkat Krishnan, and also the speakers and panelists, Mr. Senthil Nathan and Mr. Sri Kumar Narayan. Welcome all. And before I get into the introduction of the chief guest, I would like to set the context of the webinar. Basically, competition law is nothing but our erstwhile MRTP Act, and now known as competition law. Of course, this law has been more applicable in the north. In south, it is still novice. Many of them are not aware about this existence of this law, the provisions, and what it could intend to protect. Basically, this Act, Competition Act, with the objective of keeping in view of economic development of the country, of the establishment of a commission to prevent practices having adverse effect on competition, to promote and sustain competition in markets, to protect the interest of consumers, and to ensure freedom of trade carried on by other participants in markets in India and for matter connected therewith or incidental thereto. So this is the wide objective of the Act, and the Act intends to address the anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominance, merger control provisions. So during this entire webinar, we will be seeing the various provisions of the Act, and also we will have a brief panel discussion with the entrepreneurs and also the experts. So the second part of the webinar will be moderated by Mr. Prashant S. Shivdas, and I now gladly like to introduce the speaker of the day, the keynote speaker, Mr. Ashok Kumar Gupta, IAS. As more than 36 years of wide-ranging experience with Government of India and with Government of Tamil Nadu. His last posting in Government of India before joining the Commission was as a Secretary to Government of India in the Department of Defence Production. He was responsible for matters such as industrial licensing, FDI policies, export procedures. Previously, he held several positions in ministries of Defence, Health, Heavy Industries, Shipping, MSME, Commerce and Industry. While posted as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Health, he was dealing with matters relating to international cooperation, hospitals, National Cancer Control Program. He was instrumental in formulating several government policies such as automobile policies, Prime Minister's Rozgar Yojana, make procedure in India, make procedure in defense procurement. He has extensive experience in industry, has headed and turned around state public sectors units and served on the board of central and state PSUs such as Hindustan Aeronautical Limited, Heavy Engineering Corporations, Tamil Nadu Cement and many others. A gold medalist in mechanical engineering from Delhi University. He also holds a postgraduate degree in public administration from Syracuse University, USA, and an MPhil degree in defense and strategic studies from Madras University. I think the biodata keeps going on, and this is only a summary. On to the chairperson CCI, Mr. Ashok Kumar Gupta, for his keynote address. Welcome, sir. We are waiting for your keynote address.
You have to unmute yourself, sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
President, office bearers, members of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. It gives me immense pleasure to be with you on the occasion of inaugural edition of series of webinar on competition law mooted by Banking, Finance and Corporate Affairs Expert Committee of Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce. I am sure the series will use this platform very effectively to provide a robust exchange of insights on various important facets of markets and antitrust amongst policymakers, experts from the industry and government on various topical issues on a regular basis for the benefit of its members. At the outset, my compliments to each one of you. We meet at a time when a pandemic of an unprecedented scale has affected economies across the globe, including India. How to reignite the national growth engines amidst the uncertain and shaky global economic environment is a pressing question before policy makers. The recent forecasts have imbued optimism for an impending recovery. It is important that competition principles be respected along the way. In India, the direction of the government's economic reforms agenda is clear. The economic stimulus package has provided strong impetus to structural reforms in various crucial sectors of the Indian economy. We broke away from the system of controls in the early 90s, and it is being progressively replaced with a regime where the role of the state is that of a facilitator and where the market is to take the lead and become an instrument of growth and self-dependence. It is therefore imperative that we have markets that are well functioning, undergirded by healthy competition. Let me now provide a very brief account of competition law regime in India and the paradigm shift in the economic policy thinking from time to time, which led to the enactment of new competition law, that is the Competition Act 2002. opening up of the economy necessitated the Indian markets to gear up to face competition from within and outside. The then existing Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act, enacted in 1969, focused more on control of monopolies than promoting competition. It was a product of the licensing and controls regime. In the era of liberalization and globalization, particularly following liberalization of the economy in 1991, the MRTP Act was found to become obsolete in certain respects. In light of international economic developments relating more particularly to competition, it became imperative for India to shift its focus from curbing monopolies to promoting competition. Therefore, the Competition Act 2002 was enacted by the Parliament. The Competition Act follows the philosophy of modern competition laws and prohibits anti-competitive agreements, abuse of dominant position by enterprises, and regulates mergers and acquisitions which cause or are likely to cause appreciable adverse effect on competition within India. The law is applicable to both public and private enterprises. Competition law cuts across all the sectors and comes into play wherever competition is compromised, subverted, or stifled. It carries with it competitive neutrality and applies to government and non-government entities without any discrimination. As such, many government policies with anti-competitive consequences, though unintended, fall within the ambit of competition law. In correcting market distorting practices, the Commission has used an effective mix of the twin instruments of enforcement and advocacy. The instrument of enforcement has been applied judiciously, with interventions made only in such cases where business conduct was found to seriously undermine market processes and mute competition. For instance, the Commission has had an assertive enforcement agenda against cartels to free Indian markets from this pernicious economic offense and to optimize deterrence. At the same time, it has incentivized self-reporting and offered businesses an opportunity to approach the Commission for lesser penalty by making vital disclosures on cartels. The idea has been to engage industry not only for prompt detection and rectification of competition problems, but also to make them realize that all stand to gain from fair and competitive markets. This year, CCI would complete 12 years of enforcement, and during this period, our endeavor has been to build and develop a culture of competition in markets through effective enforcement of the law and proactive outreach. In spite of being one of India's youngest economic regulators, the Commission has been enforcing the law vigorously, though pragmatically. Within this short span of time, CCI has reviewed anti-competitive practices in diverse sectors of the economy, ranging from infrastructure, travel, automobile, real estate, pharmaceuticals, financial sector, publishing, manufacturing, mining, entertainment, e-commerce, etc. The Commission has so far reviewed 1,118 cases under anti-competitive agreements and abuse of dominance and 815 mergers and acquisition notices. In cases of contravention, CCI has been using diverse remedies, including cease and desist orders. Besides, in appropriate cases, monetary penalties have been imposed. On the merger review front, the Commission has been conscious of the fact that in a developing economy like India, where industry is gearing up to make the nation self-reliant, as well as to expand its global footprint, mergers and acquisitions are a potent instrument to optimize scale and improve efficiency. Competition screening of merger and acquisitions over the years has shown that a vast majority of transactions do not raise any competition concern. A green channel has been introduced recently for automatic approval of combinations. This is a first of its kind trust-based system in the world where notifiable transactions having no overlaps, be it horizontal, vertical, or complementary between the parties, are deemed approved upon its filings. It is expected to promote a speedy, transparent, and accountable merger review, striking a balance between facilitation and enforcement. The green channel route has gained traction with 1 out of every 5 transactions being filed under this route, demonstrating stakeholders' confidence. Thus, a slew of industry-friendly measures have been adopted by the Commission to ensure speedy clearance of non-problematic transactions, to reduce procedural burden, and to make filings simpler. When a nationwide lockdown was announced last year, the Commission proactively activated a system of e-filing and digital payment of fees. All internal and external communications were conducted digitally over secure networks to ensure business continuity without any physical interaction. To keep all stakeholders informed, a dedicated helpline was also set up and various guidelines were issued from time to time. In fact, CCI recognized early that COVID-19 caused disruptions in supply chains, including those of critical healthcare products and other essential commodities and services, and intervened early to address the challenges posed from competition law perspective. To cope with significant changes in supply and demand patterns arising out of this extraordinary situation, CCI issued an advisory or guidance of the businesses in COVID times and acknowledged the need for businesses to coordinate certain activities by way of sharing data on stock levels, timings of operations, sharing of distribution network and infrastructure, transport logistics, R&D, production, etc. The advisory also highlighted the inbuilt safeguards in the Indian Competition Act to protect businesses from sanctions for certain coordinated conduct, provided such arrangements result in increasing efficiencies. However, it was cautioned that only such conduct of businesses which is necessary and proportionate to address concerns arising from COVID-19 would be considered. The Commission believes that application of law needs to be nuanced, appropriately accounting for market conditions and the larger economic and policy milieu. In a young jurisdiction like India, where legacy issues have not yet faded completely, stakeholders are not fully aware of the benefits of competition, and pro-market reforms are still an ongoing agenda. Enforcement cannot be the only route to market correction. A large part of Commission's work thus comprises proactive outreach and advocacy, which we feel can be effective in preventing violation of the law and can help mitigate a range of competition concerns in Indian markets without burdening the industry with compliance and litigation costs. CCI has been publishing plethora of literatures for the consumption of stakeholders of all hue and colors. In this pursuit, CCI has published myriad of books, magazines, study reports, etc. A quarterly newsletter, Fair Play, is published regularly to keep the stakeholders informed about development of competition law, not only in India, but also around the world. CCI has published training module for administrative and judicial academies, diagnostic toolkit for procurement officials, competition compliance manual for enterprises, consolidated advocacy booklets, leaflet, etc. for the benefit of stakeholders. Correction of markets require deep understanding of markets and market developments. It is therefore that the Commission is complementing its enforcement and advocacy by conducting a series of market studies. These studies offer a valuable opportunity for proactive engagement with stakeholders and for assessing competition beyond individual behavior of firms. The intent is to develop an understanding of the structural infirmities, consumer preferences, industry practices, and regulatory architecture and their implications for competition in and for the market in different sectors of the economy. The e-commerce market study brought out certain issues surrounding e-commerce platforms, which the Commission sought to highlight through a self-regulation advisory. The telecom sector study accentuated the need for a harmonious regulatory environment focusing on strengthening cooperation among the sectoral regulators and the competition authority. A number of other market studies are now underway, which are expected to bring insights for effective policy advocacy and focused business outreach. Bengaluru's vibrant startup culture has maintained its strong and robust growth momentum. It is no surprise that the city is home to one of the largest startup ecosystems in the world. The growth in scale of Bengaluru's startups, both domestically and globally, as well as the ambition and drive of the city's entrepreneurs, continues to be a source of inspiration for the entire ecosystem. Regulators and policymakers need to provide the necessary incentives for innovation and competition. It will be no exaggeration to say that Bengaluru is emerging as the fastest growing global tech hubs for investment, and in this background, the role of competition regulation in digital space assumes critical importance. The rapidly changing and evolving digital landscape is posing new challenges for competition law enforcers, questioning the traditional parameters of competition regulation, making competition agencies develop innovative perspectives on how to apply the existing instruments suitably and devise new tools where necessary. The strength of network effects and consequent lock-ins for consumers differ from one market and one product to another. A one-size-fits-all approach does not work. A nuanced assessment based on the facts of the case and the market and technology in question is the need of the hour. The Indian antitrust law allows for the much needed flexibility within a broad framework. For instance, it is not a market share based static view that guides the assessment of dominance. A host of other factors, including entry barriers, competitors' strength, etc., are provided in the statute book in determining dominance. Indeed, the statutory framework is holistic as well as futuristic. Given the very fast evolution of digital markets, the agencies need to act swiftly and craft remedies suitably to address challenges arising out of new forms of business models. Also, policymakers need to forge appropriate policy tools and techniques to deal with the challenges thrown by dynamics of these new and fast emerging markets. Lastly, let me also share that this year, that is on February 26, CCI has opened its Southern Regional Office at Chennai. This is a step towards augmenting the Commission's regional presence and fulfilling its duties as a federal regulator by engaging closely with state governments, PSUs, industry bodies, and the academia, who are important stakeholders in fostering greater competition in the economy. The regional office is going to facilitate Commission's advocacy outreach, which has been at the core of competition regulation since the very inception of CCI. It will also facilitate enforcement by acting as a center of filing and receiving cases, documents, and facilitating investigations in coordination with Delhi office. The southern region, consisting of prominent industrial clusters, has been at the forefront of India's economic progress and cultural vibrancy, and this regional office will cater to the needs of the states of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, and the Union Territories of Puducherry and Lakshadweep. In conclusion, let me congratulate Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce for conceiving and designing this event by introducing a series of webinars on competition issues. The theme is of great topical and contemporary relevance and would go a long way in spreading awareness about the nuances of competition law regime amongst the members of the chamber. I believe events like this webinar will usher in a more synergistic approach between the Commission and BCIC to address and tide over challenges of pandemic, new age markets, and other concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for encouraging us. Definitely, we wanted to create an awareness, and that's why we are here. And thanks for your kind words, and also the broad idea about the CCI and its scope of operation in South India. Welcome to Chennai, and I hope the office and all is now set up and ready for the practice. Almost all the practitioners are looking at the CCI and how we can take the benefit of the Act and also bring awareness to the corporates. That's why we have taken various industrialists here. You can find Mr. Venkatakrishnan here. You can find Sri Kumar. He is an IT icon. Then you also have Mr. Senthil Nathan. He is from FMCG. So we have a mix of people who are going to share their thoughts. And the next section will be moderated by Mr. Prashant. And I would like to just introduce, I would request you to stay around, sir. If you
no, thank you very much. Actually, thank you very much. My best wishes. I have got some other engagement, so please allow me to log out.
Okay, sir, we leave it to you. But if you were around, it would have been very good. Or at least stay for some while.
No, I think at 4 o'clock I have got another engagement, so I'll be logging out. Thanks a lot. My best wishes for the series of webinars. Thanks a lot.
Okay, now we move on to the next session, that is the panel discussion. And I will quickly introduce the panelist. And lastly, I will introduce the moderator as well. I think there's a disturbance, Rupa. Okay. Mr. Sri Kumar Narayan, he is more than 35 years of exposure in IT sector, and I welcome you, sir, for joining and accepting our offer to you, and that too in a very short notice. Thank you very much to be here as a panelist. Mr. Sri Kumar is the CEO of Winfoware Technologies Limited, Bangalore, and he is an IT specialist and also has a foray in education sector as well, and is a multi-talented personality. And recently, he is also foraying in the e-commerce. So this is the background. He has 34 years of cross-industry experience, infotech entrepreneur. That's how he is called as. Digital transformation, international business development. Welcome you, Mr. Sri Kumar Narayan. Let's have a good time and good discussion here. The second panelist is Mr. N. Senthil Nathan. He is based out of Madurai Deep in Tamil Nadu, and he is the director of Natraj Oil Mills Private Limited, and he is an executive member of Tamil Nadu Food Grains Merchant Association. And he has been in the industry from 1993, and he has been as a director in Natraj Oil Mills Private Limited, and they are into manufacturing of consumer product in oil industry. I think you must have heard about Anjali Oil and other things. They are manufacturing that, and he is also a technical analyst on equity trading, a very strong Rotarian, and just a lot of donations to many social causes. I welcome you, Mr. Senthil Nathan, to share your thoughts and ideas about the competition law. And we are very thankful for you also to have accepting in very short notice. Let's do this panel discussion in a very fruitful manner. And lastly, I would introduce Mr. Venkata Krishnan, and he is our mentor too for this committee, and Executive Vice President and CFO, Tata Hitachi Construction Machinery Company. He carries 36 years of experience in working at A.F. Ferguson and Company, Management Consultancy Division, Unilever Companies in India, Dabur India Limited, Tata Hitachi Construction Machinery. He also served as chairman of our committee, expert committee, for last 3-4 years. And now, welcome you, sir, for joining us, and hope you to do very well in the panel discussion. And now I would move on to introduce the moderator of the session, Mr. Prashant S. Sivadas, an young, dynamic advocate who has handled more than 1,000 litigations. He holds distinction degree in competition law from Queen Mary University of London. For a minute, I thought it was in Chennai. Then I again saw it is in London. Then he has advised domestic and international clients on various areas, including competition law, antitrust laws, and almost all corporate laws, including FEMA, electricity law, drug and cosmetic law, labor laws, etc. He has a versatile, dynamic exposure, and Prashant has also appeared for more than 1,000 commercial litigation and corporate matters, and he represents various forums like High Court tribunals, NCLT, NCLAT, and now CCI. So his hobbies are cricket, and he's a trained classical singer. Maybe we will, if time permits, we can ask him to just sing a song. Mr. Prashant, the floor is with you, and we can start the panel discussion right away. On to you, Prashant.
Thank you, Mr. Om Prakash. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for staying connected. I know it's a Thursday evening at 4 o'clock, and it's a very bizarre time for us to have a webinar. It's just after lunch and summer, so people might be dozing off, but thank you all for staying connected. We've just heard a wonderful, I must say, keynote address by the chairman of the CCI, and he's in short laid out the broad contours of the legislation. Now, the Act in itself has raised a lot of eyebrows in the last 12 years of its existence, insofar as how it has transformed from the MRTP regime to the current regime that there is through the Raghavan Committee report. And then, of course, when the amendment, the 2007 amendment came in, there was a lot of challenge to the amendment even before the enactment. Although the law is dated in 2002, it was enacted only in the year 2009. And much before the enactment in 2009, there was a challenge to the amendment itself. Now, this is a very peculiar regulator because they have three wide functions. They act as a regulator in the sense that they have advisory functions, they have adjudicatory functions, and of course, as a regulator, they also regulate combinations in the market. So they have three widespread channels of regulations. We know for a fact that the Commission has been quite distinct in the kind of matters that they take up. They have been quite heavy in terms of the penalties that they have imposed, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have actually looked at the competition law. Now, the genesis for this webinar series is what was pointed out by the chairman. Very recently, they have set up a branch in Chennai. And with this branch in Chennai, now we thought it is an opportune moment for us, to rake open the doors of competition law to the southern states as well. Therefore, there was a need for us to associate with BCIC, and I thank Om Prakash, Prithvi, Rupa, and the entire team of BCIC to have put all of this together. I look forward to a wonderful 4-webinar series. While this webinar will only look at the basics of the law, and we will deliberate on certain aspects of the law that are still not clear. As we move along within the next maybe month, for the next 3 webinars, we will look at the big issues, e-commerce regulation, big tech regulation, data coming in, IP related issues, the intersection of the laws with competition law. So there's a lot to talk about. As of today, why is competition law important, relevant, or I must say, why is it scary for a lot of industries and a lot of industrial professionals? The first thing I must confess here is that the Act only has 4 primary sections, which is 3, 4, and 5, 6. Now, 3 talks about anti-competitive agreements. It could be horizontal agreements. It could. 4 talks about abuse of dominance. What is dominance? What amounts to abuse of dominance? There are a lot of factors in both 3 and 4. And of course, 5 and 6 talk about combinations and how combinations are regulated. There are thresholds in place, and you have to apply if you cross the threshold, etc. And then the commission does an analysis of how the combination might affect the market in the future. But first things first, when somebody talks about competition law, the first thing that comes to somebody's mind is to prevent a monopoly. Now, that is just one small aspect of competition law. There are a lot of other things that people need to look at insofar as competition law is concerned. There are provisions with regards to informations, who can file an information, who is an informant. There's a very recent decision of the Supreme Court as to the definition of the term informant. We have various factors under Section 19, factors that determine what is a relevant product market, how do you determine a product market, how do you determine a geographical market, etc. You have factors to determine what amounts to abuse of dominance, what amounts to anti-competitive agreements, etc. And then, of course, the section that deals with the adjudication procedure, which is Section 26. And then you have penalties under Section 27. And you have various other regulations and other provisions. The commission is one such commission where you have dawn raid powers that are given to commission. So the commission can come and raid offices. Insofar as recoveries are concerned, the commission can tie hands with tax authorities to come and recover the penalty amounts that they have imposed. There are widespread powers that the commission has. The commission, in fact, has powers regarding extraterritoriality as well. So there's a cartel that has been formed outside, or there is a parent entity with a subsidiary in India, but it affects the market in India. The commission can catch hold of you. So it is not restricted to Indian entities alone. It is also covering a lot of MNCs. It also covers a lot of other aspects which have effects in India. Now, in the last 2 years alone, we've seen a lot of change insofar as the law is concerned. We've not had an amendment to the law since its inception in 2009, and therefore a review committee was formed sometime in 2016 or 17, and then we had the review committee report come out in 2019. And then in 2020, a draft bill has been prepared for modification of some of the substantive provisions of the law. While that draft bill is pending before the Joint Parliamentary Committee, it is a big change insofar as the law is concerned. We've also had various market studies. Chairman Sri Gupta pointed it out that there are various sectoral regulators studies that have been done. E-commerce study has been done. The telecom study came out quite recently, and now they've started a pharmaceutical sector study to see what are the implications, what kinds of agreements people get into. Are there any effects? Are there any side effects, etc., of these kinds of agreements? So it is not limited to lawyers alone. This law is something that economists chip in, that industries chip in with. Right? This is for the betterment of the society. The preamble reads out the same way. Om Prakash sir pointed out, it is to prevent adverse effect on competition in the market. So the ultimate consumer is the last goal. The ultimate consumer must be protection. That is the goal of competition law. Now, before I bring in all of the panelists, I thought I'll take up the issue of product market and the geographical market myself. The Act provides for a definition of a relevant market. Now, relevant market is divided into two categories. One is the product market and one is the geographical market. So the product that you deal with will constitute the product market, and the geography or the area that you deal with constitutes the geographical market in very plain and simple terms. But insofar as a product market is concerned, you can't compare apples to oranges. You have to compare apples to other kinds of apples. So therefore, the Commission takes up various factors, characteristics, nature of the product, the pricing. There's also something known as a SNP test, small but significantly non-transitory increase in price. So these tests are carried out to see whether a product is substitutable with another product, and if it is, then the whole gamut will be considered as the relevant product market. Now, we have a Supreme Court decision that says that for examination of cartels, for examination of bid rigging, etc., you don't need to really define a relevant product market. But the product market definition is absolutely vital when it comes to vertical agreements and an investigation under abuse of dominance or your regulatory approval insofar as a combination is concerned. Because the narrower your relevant market definition, the higher your threshold for a dominance, and vice versa. The broader your relevant market definition, the less is your concept of dominance kicking in. And insofar as Section 4 is concerned, I keep telling a lot of people that I meet, big is not bad, right? Being number one is not wrong, but by abusing your market position at number one, that is the abuse of dominant position that we're talking about. So insofar as the relevant market definition is concerned, I think that is most essential for a vertical agreement, for abuse of dominance investigations, etc. And of course, insofar as combinations are concerned. Let me get in Mr. Venkatekrishnan sir for his first comments on two aspects. One is, of course, Section 3.3 that talks about horizontal agreements. And for those who have just joined in, Section 3.3 talks about horizontal agreements with people playing at the same level field, right? It does not talk about the vertical integration at all. Now, there could be possibilities of bid riggings, there could be possibilities of a cartel forming, etc. The Commission looks at all 3.3 horizontal agreements as per se illegal. There is no justification whatsoever that you can provide insofar as a cartel is concerned. But when it comes to vertical agreements, and the Commission itself in the Act have defined 5 sets of agreements. You have exclusive supply, exclusive distribution, territoriality, resale price maintenance, etc. And these are all different kinds of agreements that you can actually justify before the Commission as to why you have such an agreement. But the fact that you can justify these agreements before the Commission means that there is a rule of reason applied for each of these agreements. Therefore, in order to get your comments on this, what do you think must be the factors apart from these to determine a horizontal or a vertical agreement? And personally, do you think that vertical integration in a market is wrong, or does it actually help the purpose in driving the market, sir? Over to you, Venkat, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. For any business to happen, you need to have agreements with your partners. But if I were to look at the core principle which needs to be addressed for, is whether it leads to any appreciable adverse effect on competition. I think these are the key words: appreciable adverse effect on competition. What it means is that whether it indirectly or directly determines the purchase price or sales price at which a transaction can take place between parties, whether it limits the production, whether it limits the supply, or whether it limits any technological development in a particular market, and whether it leads to, whether the end result is leading to rigging of the market. So long as these principles are not vitiated, any set of agreement would not be contravening the Act. Let me give you an example. When you look at horizontal agreement, this is, as you rightly said, is an agreement between the peers in an industry. When I say mean of peers in the industry is, let us say, if I were to take an automobile sector, a Maruti or a Hyundai or a Tata Motors would be the peers, or a Honda would be the peer. So, are there any agreement amongst them? Need not be a written agreement, but by action, whether there is a view that there's a cartel which is leading to a price increase behavior, which impinges on competition or a free trade. So this would invite, even though, because it is a means of directly or indirectly determining the sale price at which a particular product can be made available in the market. Similarly, when I have to look at a vertical agreement, it means that not amongst peers, but between players in the value chain or a supply chain. For example, I could have an agreement with my dealerships, or I could have an agreement with my vendors. So let me give you the going in position as far as the Act is concerned. As far as an horizontal agreement is concerned, any agreement is deemed to be anti-competition unless proved otherwise. So that's a very big distinction between horizontal agreement and a vertical agreement. When you look at an agreement between peers or people in the same stage of production, it is per se deemed to be anti-competition. That is a presumption which is already there in the Act. You need to prove that it is not so. Whereas in the case of a vertical agreement, it is not per se anti-competition. So, but if there are some actions or steps which are being taken which can lead to the principles being vitiated, it will deem to be anti-competition. So let me give you an example. A tie-in agreement arrangement is treated as one of the agreement between, let's say, a company and a dealer who's dealing with sales, or an outlet which is dealing with that. So I could normally band, you have always seen banding of products. So a soap with a hair oil, a soap with a free saucer, etc. Now, is it preventing me from buying that product along with the saucer per se, or with that added equipment? That would tantamount to anti-competition, because it is not allowing people to buy on their own free will. Similarly, when you look at a resale price maintenance, you would normally see in an outlet, most of the products are with an MRP. So maximum retail price at which a particular product can be available to a consumer. Now, if I were to, whether this is a restraint of competition, no. It is to deliver a larger benefit to the consumer. But if there is the same agreement at which I will be able to sell to the next stage of the value chain, if I were to say that, okay, you are allowed to sell up to a maximum of X, but you cannot sell below Y, which is the maximum discount which is available to, which can be passed on. If I were to tweak the same arrangement to state that, that would tantamount to resale price maintenance. And therefore, there are enough cases on it to say that how a particular trade will, with the same agreement, one will not qualify as anti-competition. Some will not. The same agreement can be tweaked to also say that it can lead to competition. So therefore, the every agreement has to go through that filter of basic principle, that it is not directly or indirectly determining the purchase or the sale price, or is it limiting the production or supply or technical development in the market or it leads to rigging. So long as these three principles are not vitiated, any set of agreement will not tantamount to competition, anti-competition. Prashant, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Just two things I wanted to clarify in this. One is that despite cartels being per se, a 2018 decision of the commission itself has said that despite there being a cartel, despite there being evidences, people have not acted on the cartel, and therefore we have not imposed a penalty. That is one aspect that is still possible where the commission takes a different kind of a stand. And of course, like every other evidence in any other court, although the commission is not bound by the Evidence Act, very rarely do you get a direct evidence insofar as a cartel is concerned. Very rarely would you get an agreement that says that 5 people have signed the agreement together and therefore that is a cartel. You look at something known as plus factors. You find out indirect ways of targeting a cartel. You look at CCTV cameras, you look at hotel associations, you look at trade body meetings, etc. So that is how they come into for cartels. Insofar as tying and bundling are concerned, sir, you mentioned two products being tied in together. Generally, what happens in the market is that in a vertical chain, if suppose there is a leading soap manufacturer who has come up with also a shampoo. Now, since the soap and the shampoo are not really the same product market, the tying in happens when I leverage the soap market share that I have and tie in the shampoo with it so that my sales increase for the shampoo and there's recognition for the shampoo. That is tying. Insofar as bundling is concerned, if I want to increase the sales of a certain soap manufacturer, I will say buy one, get one free, or buy two, get one free. So those are different models. You can still justify a tying and a bundling arrangement, but it is very hard for us to justify a cartel arrangement. So that is one thing I wanted to bring out before I move to the next segment. Yeah. I must also mention if yes sir.
That one distinction also which I wanted to see is, I am aware, for obvious reasons I will not mention the name of the company. He was a leading automotive tire manufacturer. His truck tires were the hottest property, the huge demand for truck tires. They would also be manufacturing scooter tires or two-wheeler tires, which are not moving as much as the four-wheeler car tires, which are not moving. They always would they have always been hauled up, because whenever they allot truck tire to any particular dealer, they would say, okay, if you want 2 truck tires, please take so many of my four-wheeler and so many of my two-wheeler tires. That would tantamount to competition,
yes.
Anti-competition.
Yes. That is in a sense in a very dominant perspective. If you look at it from an abusive dominant perspective, it amounts to something known as leveraging.
Yeah.
Right. So that is one this thing. Just for all of the participants, if there are any questions that you have during the panel discussion, I think there's a chat box that is available. You can throw in your questions in the chat box, or I think you can reach out to both Prithvi or Rupa, and they can rally the questions to us. We have allotted about 15-20 minutes for Q&A. So if there are any questions, you can throw them up in the chat box and we'll try and pick it up as we move along. Let me now move to Mr. Sendil. So there's something known as leniency insofar as cartels are concerned. Now, this is governed under Section 46 of the Act, and you have also something known as a leniency regulation. They're known as lesser penalty regulations. Now, this is something that the Commission really forces people to get into, because there are two things that the Commission is unable to do. One is they are unable to detect cartels. Formation of cartels or trying to pull up cartels is something that the Commission is unable to do, because like I mentioned, you don't get direct evidences of cartels. So therefore, what happens is, if there are 4 people involved in a cartel, they give the opportunity to one person out of the 4 to come to the Commission themselves voluntarily and hand in all of the documentation that they have with regard to a cartel. Now, if they have handed in all of the information as per the lesser penalty regulations and Section 46, the Commission can waive up to 100% of their entire fine that will be leviable on them if they are found violative of Section 3.3. Now, in this, I have 2 legs of this question. One is, do you believe that leniency regulation by itself can be used to conduct an anti-competitive practice? Because a ringleader can say, listen, let me form a cartel myself, and then let me go and throw in the voluntary application and say, hey, look, I've submitted all of the documents, relieve me from the pressure, and impose fine on everybody else, therefore eliminating competition in itself. That's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is, how much do you feel or sense the industries or the market leaders approaching the CCI insofar as leniency is concerned? Over to you, Senthil sir.
Good afternoon, one and all. See, I'm quite entirely have a different opinion on this. See, instead of thinking or talking on leniency, I'm seriously talking about the awareness. So the awareness of this particular act has to be built up across the various sectors and various levels. So mostly when we talk about the competition, we talk only about the macro subjects. So when we talk about tenders and telecoms and other issues like bigger issues, but actually we have to see the bottom levels. See, as a joke, we say it in Tamil, we say the building is strong but the basement is weak. As like that. So we have some micro levels of the problems, whereas I am into the industry of agricultural products and food processing, edible oil. Since I am into a director of food grain and marketing auditors, and we are providing infrastructure for the agriculturalists. See, the major problem where I'm seeing there is, see, India is largest highly populated country, and we are almost wasting nearly 16% of our farm producers because due to lack of infrastructures. And using this situations, big buyers are dominating the market to buy on their desired prices. For example, I can give you mango. Mango is totally dependent on the pulping units and the pickle processor. So even I was into this industry. I was usually buying nearly 1,000 tons or 1,500 tons of mango. I could see the market. When as an end user, you can get the mango somewhere around 40 to 50 rupees or even 100 and 150 rupees per kg. But whereas if you thought of buying a mango in the field, it will be somewhere else around for 10 rupees or 5 rupees or 15 rupees per kg. So no way it is comparable when you talk about the mango. As like the same way the tomato. So as you people are allowed to have a sauce or ketchup in your table, but you don't know how the price, how the tomato is demanded and purchased in the market. This is also a dominancy. See, and also as like this agricultural fruits and vegetables, and there is about nearly 10% is wasted in oil seeds and cereals. So this is also because of the lack of infrastructures, and this gives the spaces for the dominance of purchasing, the unforeseeable purchase. So the farmers has to liquidate their stock. Since it is all perishable, they have to encash very fast, they have to act fast to safeguard their capital. See, these are all, I'm giving some examples about agricultural producers. And let's come to my industry. See, I'm into the oil business, and I'm in India is the largest importer of edible oil in the world. And I like to have a shocking news on that. India is 70% of it is requirement is imported from overseas. As like petroleum products, edible oils is being largely imported. So what is happening here is in the industry is there is an entry barrier. This is a new types of dominance. So you normally ordinary persons cannot enter into this business. Since it is a free trade, anyone can buy import from Any countries, if you want to import palm oil, you can import from Malaysia or Indonesia. And if you want to have an import of soybean oil, then Argentina, you can buy it. If you think of for sunflower oil, you can buy it from Ukraine or Russia, even from Argentina. See that you can buy it. The problem is it is not easy to sell it in domestic market, even if you are an importer. I'll give you a small example for, see, if you're not even an importer, for an example, if you want to buy a sunflower refined oil in bulk, so the price for a emerald will be 165 rupees. At Chennai delivery, you have to pay extra GST and extra freight. If you are in Bangalore, you have to buy it all the way from Bangalore at 165 plus GST plus freight. But you can't sell it not beyond of 150 rupees per packet for the retail counter. So this is a type of entry barrier. So it is a dominancy. To build up their market, certain companies, I don't want to name their names, so to build their dominancy and to their, what do you call it as barrier, they fix this price in such a way, no one can survive this industry. See, any product should be traded somewhere else around 2 to 3%. Whereas in edible oil market, the industry is surviving at 0.5% margin. This is the thing is, so leniency, I don't see any leniency. We have to bring up the awareness from the top to bottom. So most of the industry peoples were suffering actually. They don't know how to make a issue, how to solve these problems. These are all the things that are happening in. Over to Prashant.
Thank you, sir. So leniency applies only for cartels. Under Section 3.3, the leniency provision is only for cartels. So if because the commission is not able to detect cartels, they brought in this provision of leniency to enable people to voluntarily come up to the commission and say, this is the cartel that I've been at, etc. The cartel investigation have ranged from meetings that two people have had at a common seminar like we have. If it was a seminar, live seminar and not a webinar like this, then two companies meeting together and exchanging price sensitive information is evidence of a cartel. So there are a lot of do's and don'ts that go around when when a cartel investigation happens. You should not. There are a lot of investigations wherein companies have deleted or modified their hard disks, have deleted data, etc. So that is why the commission feels that you need to come forward and voluntarily own up to a cartel. And if you cease and desist from doing that cartel, then we will not impose fines on anybody. And that is insofar as competition, insofar as cartels are concerned. But I take your point on dominant position. And before I move further on the dominant position discussion is concerned, let me bring in Srikumar sir. A very pointed question to Srikumar sir as well. Sir, like the civil court, and we have a procedure under the civil court under Order 39, Rule 1 and 2 for granting temporary injunctions. The commission also has a provision under Section 33 for granting interim orders. Now, this interim order can be granted by the commission even before the investigation starts if the commission feels that the practice that is being followed is very, very adverse to the market and to the competition. Now, there have only been 5 such interim orders that have been passed, the last one being last month by the commission. What do you make out of this provision, sir? Is it a vital provision for the commission to use, or can the commission use this provision the way they want to at all points of time? There is a Supreme Court ruling that says that this provision must be used very, very sparingly. But do you see the commission using this a lot more in the days to come? To Srikumar sir. I'm not sure if Mr. Srikumar is online.
Please
Mr.
unmute.
Srikumar, you are on mute.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So thanks
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thanks to BCIC for this opportunity. So, as you rightly said, there have been only 5 instances of the commission using the interim order. So when they were qualified it, so the degree of satisfaction of prima facie evidence or of preventing the listing, is it preventing the competition? So the first thing is there is a reasonable degree of satisfaction and tentative view. It is only a tentative view. They have not taken a full view. So on 3 grounds. The first ground is that it has a higher IPO, has a dominant market position, and by listing the claimants, it doesn't change the market situation. That was the first observation. So why prevent them from listing? The second is non-accessibility for these companies to list the portal also hampers their online visibility. By listing them online, it doesn't damage cause any damage. That was the second observation. The third was probably so that was 1 and 2, and that is irreparable harm too. So on these 3 grounds, so there it doesn't affect the competition to the market. Sorry, it affects the competition to the market, preventing the listing. Likely harm may be caused. So I think there before order has been passed, and I think that can be challenged in the High Court. You know the legal but I think there is a prima facie case of preventing a competition and preventing accessibility to the market, as well as it is causes irreparable harm to the claimants. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I think there was some audio issue. Just to reiterate what sir has said, that if there is a prima facie gate that has actually been made out basis the certain criteria, etc., then it is possible for the commission to grant interim relief, and that interim relief will be in essence to protect the competition in the market. So just reiterating what sir has pointed out. I will rally back to Venkat sir again on the issue of penalties. Now, penalties is something that has been debated about a lot over the last 12 years of the Commission's existence. Section 27 talks about relevant turnover and the fact that Commission can impose up to 10% on the relevant turnover if they find out that the practice is anti-competitive or it amounts to abuse of dominance. I have here a list with me of roughly the top 12 or 13 cases where the penalties have spanned from 50 crores right up to almost 2,000 or 3,000 crores across various matters. Now, one can argue that majority of these penalties have not been recovered because of stay orders of superior courts. It could be the appellate tribunal, it could be the High Court, it could also be the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court did lay down the law as to on what you can impose the penalty, and what you can impose the penalty on is only the turnover of that product that has been classified as a relevant product market in the decision of Excel Crop Care sometime in the year 2017. So my question to Venkat sir is on a slightly different path of the penalties. Do you see companies actually being scared of this regulator? That is one. And the second part of this question is, does putting civil penalties, because India does not have criminal penalties like in the US or in the UK. In the US, the directors of companies who involve themselves in cartels can actually be jailed. But in India, we only are restricting ourselves to civil liabilities. Does imposing civil liabilities actually harm competition or better competition, according to you, sir?
Yeah. I think the issue needs to be seen from a perspective of what is the maturity level as far as the CCI Act is concerned, Competition Act is concerned. The law, no doubt, talks about turnover, 10%, not more than 10% of the turnover can be levied as penalty. But if you see the sort of, as you mentioned, rightly mentioned, the number of cases which have been there, the CCI has not been able to arrive at a just and fair method. The principle which you mentioned in the Excel Corporation case, they had very clearly said that the principle of proportionality has to be ensured. Supreme Court very clearly said the principle of proportionality. What does it mean is the action of an anti-competition, the damage caused by the anti-competition and the profit accrued due to the cartel activity is alone needs to be recovered or recovered in the form of a penalty. So, so long as this is not adhered to, you have had cases where the CCI has levied penalty on 10% of the group turnover, or even if it's a multi-product company, 10% of the total company's turnover, not necessarily the product related turnover. Or if it is a big group, you load it on 10% of the group's turnover. So we have had civil disputes, people taking it to the court to say that there's no consistency in the application of this principle. So till we achieve maturity level to make sure that it is cut and fair, that the principle of proportionality is ensured, I don't think attaching a criminal liability for such offences will be right, because it will lead to frivolous claims, frivolous penalties being levied, and directors halt up because it gives you enough visibility in the system. So I don't think till that happens, this has to be done. But for this to be credible, if you look at what the Competition Act provides for, they have armed the CCI with Director Generals to investigate cases for prima facie violation of the Act. And the investigation report needs to only focus on the facts which are presented to them or presented by the petitioner and analyze them and go through the process of analysis to see whether there was any cost benefit analysis accruing to the cartel players and whether the business practices adopted by the parties involved cartelization resulting in an undue profit to those cartel players. Now, till this happens, the CCI can be levying a penalty and people will and the players will go to the court and get a stay order. So I think till we achieve a maturity, and I think the CCI is moving in the right direction by creating the Director Generals in various regions. And I think a couple of the enforcement missionaries have now been aligned under the regional Director General offices. So I hope that in course of years, we should be able to move into that framework which you mentioned. Over to you, Prashant.
Thank you, sir. Just for elaboration.
Before going into the next question, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat box.
Sure, sir.
Yeah,
sure.
I'll has made a question. Is grant of intellectual property anti-competition because the grant prohibits healthy competition by parallel practice?
Okay. Let me answer that first, and then maybe I will ask Venkat sir to answer to supplement if any contributions are there from his side. You see, sir, what happens is under the Competition Act there is a section called Section 3 subclause 5. Now, this section specifically says that if you have an IP registration, be it a patent, be it a trademark, be it a copyright, etc., the Competition Act cannot question the validity of those registrations that you have received. So they cannot go into the question of whether it is a valid patent or not a valid patent. What they can actually do is if you're abusing that patent for an increasingly higher amount. There are two decisions that have been passed by the Delhi High Court. One is in the case of Ericsson and one is in the case of Monsanto seeds. Now, what happens in these situations is there is an overlap of jurisdictions between two regulators. Now, the commission cannot look at, like I said, the validity of a patent, but they can see whether or not there is an outflow of discrimination, price discrimination, excessive license prices, excessive royalties that are being charged, etc. In the Europe, there is a concept called FRAND terms, FRAND, reasonable and non-discriminatory pricing. Now, there, even if you have a patent and a patent is valid for almost 20 years, even if you have a patent for 20 years, your licensing requirement and your royalty requirements must be under FRAND terms only. They cannot exceed those FRAND terms. They have to be like in various other cases, for instance, income tax or GST laws. You have the principle of arm's length basis. Even if you are a related party, etc., you have an arm's length basis. So similarly here, your FRAND terms are in that same notion that you need to have it at a market parity. You cannot excessively price it because you have a patent for it. A classic example was in the Ericsson case, where they used, Ericsson is the only manufacturer of chips for phones, and they are called as standard essential patent. So every phone manufacturer has to go only to Ericsson to use that chip for their phone. Otherwise, and that phone is essential for any phone that chip is essential for any phone that you manufacture. Ericsson can say, listen, everybody comes to me, therefore I can charge 20x the amount of the cost. But that in turn has been stopped by the Delhi High Court when they said that no, you cannot charge it. It has to be on FRAND terms and nothing beyond it. That is currently on appeal before the Supreme Court. Venkat sir, any points, any views from your end, sir?
Yeah, I think the principle which has been laid out by the United Nations Council for Trade and Development, they have covered this specifically on IPR. They have said that some block exemption on such agreements need to be given because it promotes inventive activities, which in turn will help in development and bringing down costs through better technologies in the future. So they provide the sort of cover for such IPR issues. But what it specifically excludes, like what Prashant said, that that exclusivity is being abused to seek a higher profitability. So long as the principle of giving me a recognition for the inventive activity which I have done and you're remunerating me for that activity, I think that is covered by the block exemptions. So it is not per se anti-competition.
I think the question is from Mr. Ram Bala, sir. For your information, our next webinar is on the interface between IP and competition law. So we will extensively deal with all of these things. So please do join in for that webinar as well, because we will elaborately discuss this in detail. I see there's one more question from Professor Sunita Hegde, who's asked if exclusive dealership is anti-competitive in nature. Interestingly, yesterday, Venkat sir and I were talking about this scenario itself. And let me just give you one example. You see, if I am a major car dealer, let us assume I want to enter into a franchisee agreement with a Rolls-Royce or a Porsche car manufacturer. Porsche and Rolls-Royce will have certain criterias, the way you should have and operate your showroom, the number of people, the quality of people that you should have. Because you can only have one or two of those cars. You can't have 10 cars like how you have in Maruti and Hyundai. So you have one of those two cars. The people who are present at the showroom should be well versed with English. There are a number of multiple conditions that they can have. Now, the reason they have these conditions is that their brand otherwise gets tested and the brand image goes for a 6. Now, if that is the case, an exclusive dealer or exclusive dealership that you've mentioned there can be justified. And if it can be justified, then that agreement will not be anti-competitive. But without a justification, if you have an exclusive distribution agreement or an exclusive dealer agreement, then that will be considered as anti-competitive. I've got one more question from, I'm not sure, the initials are KSR. What do you think would be the scenario in the online vendors case? Common man thinks Flipkart, Amazon are dominant players. Fortunately or unfortunately for us, sir, that is pending before the Karnataka High Court. Now, there are multiple ways of looking at this scenario. From the common man's perspective, we do see that if you go onto Amazon, for instance, and you search something, their products line up first. Amazon Basics product line up first, and then the other products come in later. You also see certain scenarios where phone manufacturers launch only through Amazon and Flipkart and do not launch on the offline retail stores, etc. Amazon, on the other hand, says that we are only aggregators. We only put 2 and 2 together. We do not ourselves sell the product, etc. So that is currently under dispute. I do not want to answer the question on a public forum, but definitely over a phone conversation, I'll be happy to have this discussion with you, sir. What is the market share percentage threshold for considering M&A between two companies? I will answer that question when we reach section 5 and 6 and when we deal with combinations. But before that, I want to address the issue of abuse of dominance, and I probably get all of the speakers to chip in on this question. What happens in an abuse of dominance case is that you have to first show that a party is dominant, and that is where your relevant product market definition really must be considered, because a larger product market definition would mean the smaller is your market share, and a narrower market share definition would mean a larger market share. Although the commission has said that the percentage of market share is not the only criteria, you have to look at the size, the resources, the vertical integration, etc. There is a very thin line between when a dominant enterprise can step over and become an abusing enterprise, I must say. If that is the scenario, sir, where do you think the buck stops? Where should we draw the line between dominant and abusing that dominant position? There are guidelines in the EU about when an enterprise can abuse a dominant position. Should we need similar guidelines in India as well? I'll leave it to any one of the speakers to start off, and the other two can then chip in after that.
Yeah, either Srikumar or Senthil would be because the dominance would be relevant in their industry.
Yeah, so what the recent report by CCI commissioned on e-commerce, there are multiple cases. So the interpretation is whether it is a technology service or a product marketplace. So that is not resolved, and whether the EU model of collective dominance, whether collectively all the online aggregators or players are preventing access, therefore there is a collective dominance. And I think we are yet to define it clear, unambiguously, that providing only the electronic services constitutes access to the market or the demand or buying or the marketplace, or offline and online are there differences. I think they have been contradicting positions. I think clarity is required in terms of delineating whatever is the whether a technology service through e-commerce or a physical product offline marketplace.
Senthil sir, any comments?
No.
All right. Venkat sir?
Yeah, I see, irrespective of whether we look at a specific case or not, I would still go back to the core principle on whether it leads to an appreciable adverse effect on competition. And these are the three filters: whether it directly or indirectly determines the purchase or sale price, or forces the market to come to that purchase or sale price, whether it limits the production, supply, or technical development in the market for consumers to choose, or whether it leads to market rigging. We have enough cases of when you just mentioned about the Amazon. KSR raised the issue of Amazon and Flipkart, whether they would tantamount to rogue pricing. The question there would be that, okay, are they doing that to garner market share? Are they trying to eliminate competition? That would be the first principle which should be applied, rather than saying that, seeing it from a prism that, okay, consumers are able to get it at a lower price. The same could have been told about geo pricing when they launched their services. Now, ultimately, the issue is that what is this predatory pricing or pricing? What is the intention behind the player? Is he looking at driving the factors of production efficiently and bringing down the cost? For example, when Deccan launched their low-cost airlines, they proved to the world that how they were able to cut costs and still make money. So the same action can lead to be called as an anti-competition. It can also be deemed to be something which is promoting efficient delivery of services or products to the consumer. So ultimately, the core principle which we need to look at is whether it is leading to an appreciable adverse effect on competition. I think that should be the principle under which we need to, the prism through which we need to see every action, on whether it's leading to a domination or abuse of dominance in the market.
Thank you, Venkat. It's a wonderful example, Deccan Airways, because that is one such that stretch of 2002 to 2005 or 6 was considered as promoting competition in the market, because all other airlines were forced to follow suit and pick up their business models as well. On the other hand, we've had scenarios where enterprises who are dominant predate the price, and the concept of predatory pricing is that you price below the average variable cost. There are cost regulations in the act to determine the costs, etc. But if you price it below the average variable cost as regards the market, then you're predating the pricing. Now, the concept of predation means that you are either looking at removing the people from the market or not allowing other people to come into the market. If that is the intention and you are the whole and soul of the market tomorrow, then that amounts to abuse of dominance. So we have two different kind of practice models that we've just been highlighted here. KSR sir has picked up a very valid question on big tech regulation and all of that. Recently, there is a suo motu investigation against WhatsApp and Facebook because there are data that is being exchanged between WhatsApp and Facebook then sells it out to monetize that data, etc. So we are covering our third and fourth webinar is going to cover big tech regulation with data principle policies coming in, etc. So we are going to cover all of that as well in detail towards the third and the fourth one. Before I move on to the next segment, which is on combinations, I'll now pick up Mr. Ravichandra's question on what is the percentage market share threshold for considering M&A between two companies. So ironically, in the Act, there is no market share threshold. The thresholds under the Act are twofold. One is basis the turnover of the individual company or the group company, and the other is basis assets of the individual company and group company. So as an individual, if you have a certain turnover or if you have a certain asset, and then as a merged entity, if you have a certain asset and a certain turnover, then you will be obligated to file an application before the commission for their approval. However, if you don't meet that threshold, then you have the option of not filing an application before the commission. Secondly, with and Chairman sir had pointed it out that the concept of green channel had opened out in 2019. Now, these are for companies who are merging, who don't meet the threshold, but at the same time do not have any vertical, horizontal, or any complementary overlaps insofar as the merger is concerned. So they do a self-assessment under the Act. And once you do a self-assessment under the Act, if you provide a report to the commission, then a green channel route is available to you. So irrespective of whether the commission really complements, does not complement, gives you instruction, does not give you instructions, etc., it is deemed approved. Now, there is no concept of market share percentage basis regions. Insofar as abuse of dominance cases are concerned, the market share has not been defined saying beyond this we will consider you as dominant. It completely depends on the market. There could be 2 players in the market, there could be a single player in the market, there could be 10 players in the market, etc. But one of the imports that the Commission has done from the EU is that they have reasonably affirmed and said that 40% will be the benchmark threshold insofar as abuse of dominance cases is concerned. And the last one is a global merger between 2 MNCs, although Indian arms do not merge. Why is there a role of competition law? So if you look at, let us assume a Google and a Facebook merging in the US, then automatically there will be an effect to the Indian entities. Now, if that effect to the Indian entities garners widespread attention in the form of abuse of dominant position, then the CCI can automatically rake up the issue. There is also a concept of Global Competition Law Association, wherein all of the competition regulators have signed a pact with the UN, where they can exchange information. So therefore, if you've observed over the maybe last 2-3 years or so, Google is being investigated both in US and in the EU. And similarly, there is an investigation that is happening in India basis what is happening there. So there is a sort of cartel, if I must say, amongst the competition regulators themselves to exchange information, etc. But price sensitive information cannot be exchanged between them. So that is the concept of combinations, I must say. Before I get to closing remarks from each of the panelists, are there any other questions that anybody needs answered? If yes, we can accept those questions now. Otherwise, I'll move to closing comments from each of the speakers. I think we're a little short of time, so I think we can move to closing speakers if there are no other questions.
Mr. Senthil Nathan, you would like to do a closing remark? He was in a little hurry to go.
Sure, sir. I think Senthil sir can then start with closing remarks.
I think he's on mute. Yeah.
Good evening. So it's an eye-opening session for me too, also to understand this session. I thank Om Prakash for me to inviting. I really thank you all, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senthil. Mr. Sri Kumar?
Yeah, so basically one of the important things to observe is the power of data. It is not just the act or the market share. The data, both non-commercial use as well as the personal data. So how we are going to interpret data? For example, the parliament, I think the scrapping of cars, already the data has been sold to some private long back for so that data is available with somebody. So how that is, when somebody has an unfair advantage with the data, that is going to influence the competition, market share and the dominant position. The second point is because of this digital nature of how digital markets are evolving, it is a cross industry. So telecom is doing banking, banking is being done by mobile app, stock markets are being done with app, social media is trying to trade or disrupt a short position, healthcare. So how this cross industry position is going to determine the market share and influence competition. So those are the main, because there are players outside of the core industry who play it separately as a digital platform. And there are native core operators or businesses. So how the like aggregators who can bridge a last mile logistics or like Ola or those kind of things. That is going to be cross industry influences how they carry out the dominant position. I think with that I conclude. It's interesting to watch because the US antitrust proceedings are also daily. There are results and judgments, and EU also is playing. So I think the trade itself, cross-border trade itself, is going to be determined by the competition now.
Thank you, sir. Point well taken. And I think this is what we're going to analyze in the next few webinars as well. So it will be great if you can join us for those webinars as well. Thank you so much for joining in. Venkat sir, last comments from you, sir.
As I rightly said, this particular session is only to open the vista of people to competition law. And the next 3 weeks, 3 Thursdays, the seminars or the webinars are going to open up, focus on select aspects of this Competition Act and dwell deep into it to understand what are the nuances and how something can get caught in anti-competition activities or proceedings. So I think this is what is important for us, and we will certainly disseminate the fact of the seminar to the appropriate group members within our chamber, so that we bring in more and more participation into this particular activity. Competition Act becomes all the more relevant when all of us are focused on creating that unique selling proposition. So how do I create the unique selling proposition, basing it on what, and whether that is preventing competition, whether it's creating a dominance by use of it, whether it prevents free trade, that comes into question. So it is not just data, or it's not just, for example, in my industry, I have a dealership agreement. Now there could be some clauses, innocuous looking clauses, which can get attracted tomorrow because I've restricted something, or I made him buy, or I asked him to invest on certain things which is relevant for me. He cannot go elsewhere and do something else. So we can get caught in such anti-competition measures if we are not careful. So it is not just IT or e-commerce or data based thing. Any business, however innocuous it might seem, can land you up in a problem. So please take care, and I'm sure with more and more participation, our role of this committee is to make sure that the provisions are disseminated to the maximum extent, and we'll do all that is required in the coming weeks.
Thank you, sir. I think it has been well put by everybody that the arms of the CCI are quite large. It does not hold itself to one particular sector. I think it spans across sectors, spans across levels. It doesn't matter which position and which level you're at. And I think there needs to be a significant development insofar as advocacy of this law is concerned. So feel free to join in for the next few webinars. I think BCIC will do a great job in trying to get more participation. I'll hand this over to Mr. Om Prakash to take it forward and close the webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Prashant, for the wonderful moderation, and thank you, panelists, for addressing all the queries, and thank you, participants, for raising wonderful questions. The question on e-commerce is relevant today, and as long as the beneficiaries, like consumers, are benefited, I don't see any, it's an adverse to the community as such. Let's debate it, and we have next 3 sessions to go, as Venkat was mentioning. So we will come with the select topics which is relevant to the market and the industry as such, and see you all. And I'm not telling you the vote of thanks, because we are still away for 3 more wonderful sessions to come. We will come up with the beautiful topics and good speakers. I would also recommend participants, those who are willing to be speakers here with their wide experience, can really volunteer us. We will like people to participate. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, Venkat. Thank you, Senthil and Srikumar. That was wonderful. And thank you, BCCI Secretariat, for facilitating the whole thing and putting us all together. Thank you very much. And thank you on 15th of April, same time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I request, sir, there is a small video on a thank you clip coming up. I request you to stay, sir.
So,